Hello aspirants, welcome you all to Believers Science Academy. In today's continuation part of the polity high yielding topics for the Prelims 2026, we have one of the most important chapter, which is the constitutional amendment, amendment to the constitution, an important chapter which has been, the questions from that particular chapter which has been in the prelims so far. So we have summarized the entire chapter in just 9 questions, which pretty much subsumes the entire chapter from Lakshmikant itself. And I hope you know the drill by now. We will first read out all those 9 questions and then try and analyze them. Let's begin. So first question, which constitutional provision governs the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and lays down the procedure? Who can initiate constitutional amendment bill? Can it originate in state legislatures? Is presidential assent necessary for a constitutional amendment act? What majority is required to pass a constitutional amendment bill? And is joint setting allowed in case of deadlock? When federal provisions are amended, what additional requirement must be fulfilled? Fifth question, can the president return a constitutional amendment bill for reconsideration? Sixth question, which provisions can be amended by simple majority outside the scope of Article 368? Explain with examples. Which provisions require only special majority of Parliament? Which provisions require special majority plus state ratification? Is there a time limit? What if states remain silent? And the last one, can amendment procedure be critically evaluated and what are its strengths and weaknesses? So this 9 questions pretty much covers the entire chapter from the Lakshmikant, and if you have seen, we have tried and covered almost all the important areas just within these 9 questions. And now, why are we doing this in terms of questions and answering? Why? Because ultimately we want to make sure that we try to recall, and that recalling as an exercise will help you to recall in the actual prelims on the day when it actually matters, right? So now, without any further ado, let's start with the explanation. First question, which constitutional provision governs the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and lays down the procedure? So it is the Article 368, which deals with the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and the procedure. So Article 368, very important, which talks about the amendment of the Constitution, and it embodies 2 important things. One is the constituent power of the Parliament to initiate the constitutional amendment acts, constitutional amendment bills, and then the formal amendment process itself, the entire process as to how the amendment should happen, right? The 2/3 majority, the special majority which I'm talking about, right? So all of that is what is embodied under Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. However, some provisions can also be amended outside the scope of Article 368 through simple majority. It means that constitutional amendment acts or constitutional amendments need not necessarily be done only through special majorities. And also, it also means that certain constitutional amendments can also happen through simple majorities as well. Like, for example, addition of new states, right? Having, or let's say, having to speak English in the proceedings in the Parliament, right? So there are few things which can be amended through simple majority, and those things are not covered under Article 368 is what that means, right? And also very important to keep in mind, Article 368 only talks about 2 important majorities. One is the amendments through special majority, and another one through state ratification, right? Next question, who can initiate constitutional amendment bill? Can it originate in state legislatures? And is presidential assent necessary? See, amendment bill can be introduced in either house of the Parliament, means either Rajya Sabha can initiate, or also the Lok Sabha can even initiate the constitution amendment bills. And once this is let's say passed in each of the houses, and each of the houses, it has to be passed through special majority. And even if it is passed, well, let's say even if it is initiated from the Rajya Sabha, it has to pass through special majority and should go to Rajya Sabha, and there it has to get the special majority. And once this is done, it goes to the president, right? It goes to the president. And once after it goes to the president does not have an option or does not enjoy any veto with respect to the constitutional amendment bill. Rather, he has to confirm, or he has to give his assent. And another important thing to keep in mind, that the constitutional amendments bills, or let's say an attempt to amend the constitution, cannot happen through state legislature. That is also very important. They do not have initiation power. And also, prior permission of the president is not required. So, for example, placing a money bill, right? We need a prior intimation of certain things, and here the prior permission of the president is not required. Rather, the president assent is absolutely necessary once the bill is being passed by successive processes in the both houses, Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha, right? Next, after the passage, president must give the assent and cannot withhold the bill. And also very important thing to keep in mind, that who can pass constitution amendment bill. So both a minister can also initiate or place the constitutional amendment bill, and also a private member is also eligible to place the constitutional amendment bill, which is also very important to keep in mind. So amendment becomes law only after the president assent. So until the president gives his assent, it will only stay as a constitutional amendment bill, and only after the president has given his assent it becomes a constitutional amendment act. Next is, what majority is required to pass a constitutional amendment bill? The answer is special majority, majority of total membership of the house, and 2/3 of the members present and voting. And is joint sitting allowed in case of a deadlock? Answer is no. So the joint sitting for the constitutional amendment bills is not allowed, and if there is a deadlock, it only means that the bill has failed, right? And fourth question, what federal provisions are amended? What additional requirements must be filled? See, apart from special majority, which only talks about the total majority of the total membership of the house and majority of more than 2/3 of the members present and voting, apart from that, there is another special majority when if the parliament wants to amend, or if it wants to bring any changes in any of the federal features of the constitution, then the ratification by at least half of state legislature is also required and is very compulsory, right? And this ratification by the state can happen through simple majority itself. That's all. So the special majority applies only to the parliament, Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha, and if any federal provisions are involved in the amending processes, then state ratification is also required. And when the state has to ratify, they can only ratify through simple majority, and no role of governors beyond the formal process. So this talks about the federal spirit, right? It reflects the federal spirit, and that is also one of the important point. Next question, can the president return a constitutional amendment bill for reconsideration? Absolutely, we have discussed. No, the president cannot return the amendment bill. President must give his assent, which means he has no pocket veto or suspensive veto with respect to amendment bills. So amendment power is sovereign once procedure is completed. Means the procedure after it passes through both the houses, through through attaining the special majority, it has to be given the assent, right? Next question, which provisions can be amended by simple majority outside the scope of Article 368? Very important, because some of the provisions looks as if it needs special majority, and that is where most of the students go wrong. So it is very important that you know all of these with examples as to which are those provisions which only require simple majority for the amendment. So these are not, first important thing is those amendments which only require simple majorities do not come under the scope of Article 368. Very important. And next, they are not amendments in constitutional sense. Rather, example, we have a few examples. If you see, you will get to know. First is admission or establishment of new states, formation of new states or alteration of boundaries, creation or abolition of state legislative councils. Then we have any changes with respect to the salary, emoluments, allowances, especially the second schedule, and even delimitation of constituencies. These are kind of very much in use. So it is very important to keep in mind that delimitation of constituencies can happen only through simple majority. Quorum in parliament, rules of procedure in parliament, citizenship provisions, fifth and sixth schedule administration. This is also very important. It looks very important, so hence you might think special majority is required, but no, just a simple majority is sufficient. So it is pretty much done like an ordinary legislation. Next question, which provisions require only special majority of parliament, right? So we have some of the important things, especially the core of the core foundation of the core pillars of the constitution, like fundamental rights, TPSPs, and most of the constitutional provisions, anything related to union and state executive powers, judiciary structure, except the federal aspects. Because when we talk about the federal aspects, that is when state ratification is required. Okay. So judicial structure, emergency provisions, elections, schedules, except where specified. So elections, if it is president election, then once again state ratification is required. So this is the default amendment category. Next, which provisions require special majority plus state ratification? So there are a lot of categories, right? Those amendments which only require simple majority, those amendments which only require special majority, and those that require both special majority and state ratification, right? So which are those? Usually, we have the election of president. We have, as I said, election as a general. Anything related to election, it's a constitutional thing. So you have to just you just need special majority. But elections of president, as I said, it requires the state ratification, extent of executive power and the union of states, Supreme Court and High Court's distribution of legislative powers, especially the 7th schedule, representation of states in parliament, Article 368 itself, and any federal structural provisions. And is there any time limit for it? The answer is the state does not, or let's say there is no specified time limit as in when the state should give its ratification. No time limit is mentioned. State has its own liberty in terms of giving its ratification. So no time limit is specified. Very important point. And what happens if states do not act? So basically, amendment remains pending until the sufficient ratification, and silence does not count as approval also. This is also very important. And ninth question, can amendment procedure be critically evaluated? What are its strengths and weaknesses? So strengths, it's the balance between the rigidity and flexibility. So we are not as rigid as the USA constitution, and also we are not as flexible as the Britain, right? And it protects the federal structure. Why? Because federalism, or let's say we have a quasi-federal kind of a feature, or quasi-federal kind of a tendency in the Indian system, which we have adopted. And it also means that how much of the power and how much of the liberty we have given to the states, right? The parliaments or the governments at the state level, right? Not at the central level, but the state level. So imagine if the constitution, or let's say the parliament had the supreme power, the center had the supreme power to even amend all those federal structures. So the Indian constitution, which is quasi-federal, can anytime become unitary, right? And in fact, that is also one of the special features of the Indian constitution, that during emergency it automatically becomes unitary in nature, right? And I hope you know all of these things. So rather, if these protections were not given, if half of the state ratification was not demanded, then probably the center would have had utmost power in even undermining the powers of the state, right? So that is also one of the important things. So hence it protects the federal structure as well. And then it prevents hasty changes, because we have certain procedures. It's not the simple majority, especially with respect to constitutional changes that is required. We have special majority, and it is not easy that you can easily get that special majority. Plus, we're talking about two houses, Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, right? So hence it is a very very important that it puts a brake on some of the hasty changes and allows adaptation to changing needs. So also the constitution, or let's say the makers, when they adopted Article 368, or when they created Article 368, they did not make it as rigid as how it is in USA. They have made it pretty much doable, right? It is not neither too flexible nor too rigid. So hence it allows adaptation over the changing needs of the society. Next is, what are the weaknesses? States cannot initiate amendments. Very important. Unlike in the USA and all of the other Western Western countries, where state can also initiate amendments, it is not possible in India. No referendum mechanism. Parliament dominance may weaken the federalism also. That is also very important, right? And no time limit for state ratification creates uncertainty, right? So this is also there. So often called a flexible federation with unitary bias. So that is what we said. So anyway, that is all for this particular video. I hope it is pretty much summarized as to what amendment to the constitution is, and I hope you have gotten the best from whatever we are supposed to give you. Well, that's all for this particular video. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.